tell me if you've been doing the same thing. I'm starting to see things around my house that I just never noticed before, just did not look at. I was too pumped to just like find a house, win the bid, and all that.
Oh, I know all
Not
about
that they're
that.
problems, but it's like I look at it and I'm like, how have I never looked at it in this way before? Like that needs some
I
attention.
know.
How have I never looked at that?
Yeah, I do that a lot. And the
You
other
know?
thing that I do is like I always start thinking about, well, when I think about it, it's one thing, but when I vocalize it, I just can't help but like feel as if I'm coming off ungrateful. So I always try to like add that caveat. It's like, of course, I'm grateful for like what I've got, but it's like, we're at a point where we are lucky to be where we're at, but also it's like, it's not a shame to want more either.
Never,
It's not a
never wrong
bad
with
thing
wanting more.
to want to upgrade and whatnot. It's like, sure, plenty of people have plenty of problems, and some of them are self-made. Maybe most of them, it's depending on the person. But like, I'm looking forward to upgrading. I'm looking forward to having a new space that I'm more comfortable in, that I have more space in. It's just got a better layout. Things we've talked about before. But I do the same thing. I'll walk around and I'm like, oh, the way that this looks, or the way that this is laid out, or whatever it is. It's like, like you said, it was it was a real test of the times. It's like, the time of my life, what was going on, and then just like how old we were, and then we were getting married, and we were kind of going both through these stages of life at the same time. Where it's like, I want to have a home, like I want to have a place to like raise a
Yeah,
family, to be a family,
home base.
and we're like, okay, well, and I just never wanted to live in an apartment. Found myself living in an apartment, and I'm like, I don't want to be one of those people. Like, I had neighbors, and not, nothing against them. It's not to shame them or anything, but they have like 3 or 4 kids from the age of like 3 to 8 or 9, 10, and they're going to run around outside. And it was cool because they did have friends in the neighborhood. I'd always see them riding their bikes around with their friends, just like I did in my neighborhood. But I just didn't want that for my family. I didn't want to live in an apartment forever. And I just honestly, I was never in fear that like if I'm here more than a couple years, it'll turn into 10 or 20. Like I knew I'd get out, but it just couldn't come soon enough. So as soon as we found something, we're like, all right, like jump on it. We actually jumped on a house and made an offer. Thank God we got outbid just on the street from where I am. That was like at least 20, 30 years older. And
Mm.
in probably, I would say, overall worse condition than the one we have now. And it was pretty much the same price. Um, and it would have needed some actual work. Like this house, we can get by without doing really anything except for maybe, we had a little bit of work done, so updating the walls, like painting and stuff like that. But like we both were like counting our blessings after that we didn't, they didn't take our deal. We got outbid by like 20 grand or something ridiculous, which is insane. But
Dude, there were people going nuts the last couple of years. Yeah, no, I don't think it sounds ungrateful at all. I I think there's almost this strange it's like it's weird how people almost seem scared to like want more. Like they think they're bad people or something because they want more. Someone told me one time like there's nothing wrong with wanting more. It's not
right,
a bad thing. You're not forgetting where you came from. You're not like, you know, dis I don't know, disrespecting or dishonoring the sacrifices of the people before you or anything. It's just that you've got you know what has worked for you in the past and you're like, okay, I can take on more than this right now, because there's some people that they can't handle a whole house. They can't handle like a big old 3,000, 4,000 square foot house. That's big for most people
right,
in that range. Most people aren't they can't handle that because they can hardly keep 1,000 square foot apartment clean.
right,
But if you get to that point where you're like, we're living really nice, but we're genuinely just kind of outgrowing it, and we're making the money that can support it. We are ready to put in the effort to take care of it. Not everyone's there early on, so you kind of it just goes in phases. I think like this is it's probably going to end up being a great starter home for you guys, great starter home for us. We probably will move on at some point,
mm-hmm.
but I don't think there's anything to feel. It's not ungrateful by any means. You acknowledge where you came from and what you had to deal with, because everyone kind of has to pay their dues, right? Like we had
Right.
our share of housing that was not ideal. The West 90th house,
That
for
we have.
example, was you know had a shotgun blast across the street at one point at the brick wall down the road.
Yep.
Just what a time. But yeah, things just different now. Yeah, give it a couple years though. Hopefully sell for a little bit. I don't expect to make much on this. That's probably why I don't think we're gonna do too much work because
Same. I can't do enough to justify a higher value than just the market rate at the time,
right.
unless I were to like legitimately finish the basement, which is going to cost me more than I want to put into the house. It's just not worth the effort and the money now when I could just be using that money to save up for the down payment on the next house. I'm not going to put 20
Yeah, it's
grand
either
into the
like
basement and then,
no,
deal
I
with
mean
it
you got to
later.
add like major functionality, like
Right.
add a garage or add
Hmm.
another bathroom or
Or
something
a,
for it
a
to
full on
even
addition to the back of
start
the
to
house
fetch
or something
value.
like that.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, like no one cares what color the paint is, or if you paint the cabinets and this and that, like it's gonna look nicer
Well,
for
let's
sure.
be
But
honest. Anybody buying a house generally walks in and they're like, I love the layout, but I want to paint. Like so many people, it's like unless you get a new build or something like that, or there's also the contingent where you walk in and you're like, okay, I like this, but within time you're gonna paint. It's like you might like the way it looks now, but give it
sure.
5, 10 years, eventually you're gonna want to change things up. Not only that, but like, taste change as you get older. What is like modern or even rustic, depending on your preference. It changes over time as well. So the color schemes change, and you just get tired of the same old too. So it's like the
Sure.
one thing that's almost certain
Absolutely.
is that eventually you're going to be changing the wall color. It's more like the layout of the house, the size of the house, the functionality, like you said. Those are the big ones.
Functionality, right. Yeah, there's such thing we learned about because I had my license. I technically still have my real estate license. It's just in a certain capacity, but there's like functional obsolescence they talk about. Like that can actually damage the value of a house if it's like, four bedrooms and one bathroom. Functionally
Right, right,
kind of obsolete,
right,
like doesn't really fit in there. So if you can change up the function, like, looking at this house, right? We got a split level, like there's very little function we can change. There's just not much you can do with it.
right.
But that's we can clean things up. I can clean up the landscaping. I can paint and make the inside maybe a little more modern. Maybe we'll swap out the carpeting upstairs and make it all because we have three different kinds of carpet upstairs right now.
Right.
So if we get all consistent carpeting, I would love to do it down in the den too. I would probably do that all at once. So it's like just the I don't know, you could probably get away with maybe 5 or 6 grand, something like that. Do the carpet for the entire house.
hmm
But
Does
like,
your actually
are we gonna get that much
I think
enjoyment out of
the
it? But
only thing that you would probably be able to do with the way your property's laid out is like what Tom's parents did, like an actual addition on the back where your patio
yeah.
is. If you turn that
Mhm.
into an actual sunroom, like an enclosed weatherproof sunroom, that would probably be the only thing that you could do with your house, but it's something, right? If I mean, again, if you were planning to be there for a long time or at least long enough to enjoy it before you sell, right? Like if you were to do it over the next year or two, live there for another 5 to 7 years before you sell, then it'd probably be worth doing. Um, but again, like I
That's
said,
my income take up quite a bit.
and it's the
But that's
cost benefit. It's like, okay, so am I going to spend that
right.
amount of money to do something like that just to then turn around and sell it? And again, am I going to get the value out of that room in addition to like the price I paid for the house for it to be worth doing? Probably
We
not.
won't.
Yeah.
Like if this was the house we were gonna end up in and we had like two kids already or something like that, yeah, that would probably make a lot more sense.
Hmm.
I might look into redoing the shower in the basement because we got kind of just kind of like a quickly thrown together shower down there. Just a work shower basically. But if we have the ability to, God willing, we would move to something a little bit bigger, something maybe a little bit, probably a little closer to work. I don't mind the commute right now,
Hmm.
but it's about 25, maybe 30 minutes. I don't mind that time at all. If we could, it's usually when I get my like podcasting done, I like watch
Hmm.
stuff and
Hmm.
whatnot. And if I could, if we could take that down to 10 to 15 minutes, maybe that would, sweeten the deal a little bit. But we're happy with what we got in the meantime. I think it's a great start. It's a great practice. A little bit less square footage to take care of. It's not the nicest house ever. It's a great house. I'm really, we're very thankful for it, but it's a good practice home for us. And I
Hmm.
think we will probably, I give it 5 to 10 years, 5 to 10 years, something like that. We'll probably end up moving as long as the market's in good shape. Be really interesting to see what happens in 2028, what goes from there. I know
Yeah.
it's crazy. Everyone is so enamored right now or disgusted right now, which is its whole own conversation. Like, but just jumping ahead of all that, like, what do you think happens after Trump? What happens
So
post Trump?
I think I've actually spent a little time thinking about this, and it's not a super deep thought, but I think on the surface level, I think it just depends on how fast and how thoroughly they break things. If he's able to just establish a new system of governance, shall we say, from the extremely deep seated, you know, what would you call it? Like, I mean,
The
basically
status
deep
quo.
state, like just this kind of shadow government that we have going on. If we're able to kind of break through that a little bit, or at least make it known to the public, really shine a light on it enough to even get like an independents and um, sane Democrats to agree with, that at least that the general puppets on either side are just that, they're just puppets, so if enough people believe that when the next election season comes along, then that I think that will really determine the fate, and along with that, obviously, and or rather even aside from that, is all the tariff stuff and the reshaping with the economic side of the country and all that kind of stuff, all the Doge stuff. I think if they're able to be successful in all these different arenas, then that will lead us to potentially a really good next, well, as they say, kind of the golden era, right? I think 2028 could go really well if all of that stuff is done within the next 4 years. If we're not so worried about, which at least Trump, at least at the top level, he doesn't have to worry about reelection. So he has truly 4 years to get stuff done. Really they say, oh, it's 2 years and then you got to worry about reelection. Well, at least in this case, he doesn't have to worry about that. So as long as we win the midterms as well, we should have a solid 4 years without really too much focus on campaigning, um, to actually get that stuff done. I think if that's done effectively in the next 4 years, then we really could see a continuation of what's just beginning now. And by the same token, if we don't see that get done, or if it's just kind of convoluted enough and people don't get the message by then, I mean, then it's gonna be like any other 4 to 8 year period. It's just gonna go back the other way for another 4 to 8 years, and then we're just gonna be stuck in the same cycle we've been in at least for our entire lifetime. So
Yeah, it's fascinating because historically, I believe there are, when it comes to like bouncing back and forth from Republican to Democrat, it's almost always one for one. It's like
yeah,
if a
yeah,
Republican's in there for 2 terms, a Democrat's in for two
yep.
terms. If a Republican follows by 1 term, then a Democrat follows by 1 term, and it seems to keep that balance, which is really fascinating. So based on that alone, it would indicate that a Democrat's going to get elected in 2028. Um, it's going to be really interesting. I feel like this is a very transformational time because one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to force the response to Trump, which we see polls out that apparently people are very much in favor of what Trump is doing, despite what the mainstream media will tell you. Polls will polls tell you that people, if we're going to trust the polls at all,
Hmm.
people are liking what Trump's doing. He's standing up for the people for the first time, seemingly in decades. But regardless, these ideas aren't going to go anywhere. These ideas are not going to die out. People are going to start paying attention, and it's going to either force the Democrats to come back towards the center a little bit,
Hmm.
which seems unlikely for anyone that kind of like pays attention. They seem to only go further left, but who knows? Maybe it'll force them to come back to the center a little bit, or the country's going to keep getting wilder, and we're gonna end up with an even more lefty president, a little more progressive president, and that, it's like what happens then?
Yeah, I mean,
Does
I,
all this stuff get undone, or
well, I
do they
mean,
take credit for Trump's
so
work? What
so
happens
yeah,
then?
a couple of things on that. One, I think generally we have kind of entered the era of order by executive fiat, and we saw that with,
Mm.
Trump signed a good amount in his first term. Nobody can deny that. Biden was like, "Hold my beer,"
And
and
then
now Trump
Obama.
is like, "Okay, well, yeah, right." Obama kind of started it, but yeah, and then you have Biden, and then now we're back to Trump, and he's doing a lot by executive order, and so far it seems that there are some constitutional questions about it that have been raised, but so far, as far as anything that's happened, it's been appealed and approved, and we haven't really had any true issues. But but I do on the poll thing you were talking about. Did you see the clip of Harry Enton in the last couple days? He's like I think he's the CNN poll guy, or maybe it's one of the mainstream channels. He's the guy, tall guy,
Dark
black
haired
hair. Yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Hmm.
he's like, I feel like every time I see a new clip of that guy, I just feel like he'd be fun to have a beer with because he's a numbers guy. And I'm a numbers guy. I know you're kind of a numbers guy
Sure.
too. So, like, but every time I see him, he just gets so excited about the numbers. And I don't know which way he leans or not, but like, he's just so
Yeah, totally.
excited to talk about the numbers. Like I really don't think he cares what they say as much. He's just having a good time. And I saw this clip of him just in the last
He's
couple
on
days.
CNN for what that's worth,
Sure,
but yeah,
sure.
go on.
But he's talking about the poll just came out. It was one of the questions was like, does Trump have too much power, too little, or just the right amount? The majority of
So
people said that it was either just the right amount or too little, by like 53% to 47, which was kind of interesting.
yeah, yeah.
And then
Hmm.
he was talking about the difference between like this time in 2017, after his after he was inaugurated the first time versus now, and it was like a 7 point swing towards Democrats the first time around. Now it's only a 1 point swing, and he was talking about it, and he was like, I just think it's really interesting, and the lady's like, yeah, me too, and he's like, wait, really, you too? And he just got even more excited because somebody else liked the numbers. I just thought it was so funny. I'm like, man, that'd be a guy I'd love to talk to because I just love the numbers as well. So and it seems to me that he, because for a while now, everything's been Trump, like trending in Trump's direction, but he's like no less excited about it. Even if he does lean to the left, he just loves the numbers.
Yeah, I'd bet money he leans left, but he's got
I would too.
a mostly he seems pretty unbiased for, he goes after the numbers and whatnot, which is great. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, the Democrats love that. We got to assume that those polls are worth something because the left loves to lean on the polls when it's their time in the sun,
Right.
right? It's worth something. It's substantial. It's trustworthy. It's got to still be trustworthy. No, it can't just
Right.
suddenly be untrustworthy just because a Republican's in
And
office. So
not only that,
really,
but
he's
like
doing the will of the people.
most of their polls, especially around election seasons, are always trending in the Democrat direction, and usually even more so than we end up seeing in the actual results of an election. Like usually they're like, there was something about Hillary being up like 15 points in one of these swing states, and Trump ends up winning it. So either they're over polling their side to make it look like people don't agree with the current agenda when it's a Republican in office, or they're conducting perhaps a legitimate poll, shall we say, with people from all sides, in which case they're finding something more toward the middle, but it never actually leans generally more to the Republican side. It's usually like, oh, well, they're only underwater by 1 point instead of we feel like it should be 10. And now we're starting to see, even on, these mainstream channels, the polls are trending in Trump's favor. And that's the last thing they want to say, but it's the results of
Sure.
their polls, so they're
Which
reporting
is
on it.
And that's really saying something because you
Right.
got to imagine between Democrats or Republicans, who is less likely to take the time to answer a poll? Is it the Democrats or the Republicans?
Right.
Probably the Republicans. They're probably less likely to take the time of day to sit down and fill out a poll. So the fact that the Republicans are still being, in my, the fact that they're still being represented as positively as unanimously as they are, or as majority as they are, perhaps, is I think is telling
I
because
also
I
think
feel like there's no one more ready to just talk about their troubles and their concerns than a Democrat.
I see it from both sides though, because I could also see the Republicans being more likely to respond to polls when their person is in office. They want to brag about it a little bit more, which, there's nothing wrong with that on
Sure.
either side. So I could see that going both ways, but I do generally agree with the sentiment there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. RJ had a nice take today. The
I watched it, but what specifically?
more it's like the last couple videos, maybe a little bit less of the fanboying, a little bit more of like acknowledging, he's just not completely bought into the bipartisan system. Like something in
Sure.
his video today was something to the effect of like, not a huge fan of either party. Like
Hmm.
really, let's be honest, both parties are unnecessary, which is kind of an interesting concept because then you hear about like these other countries that have like five, six, seven major political parties. We've got two here. It's like, so
You
it's
know
kind of an
what?
interesting
People
thing.
like our buddy, they crap on the bipartisan system all the time, and sure, it has its problems. I would so much rather be ruled by 53% of the company or the country than 23%. When you have six or seven
Yeah.
parties like you have in Canada, they have three parties usually. They need like 34% of the vote on average, assuming that all the parties are relatively equal in order to be ruling the country. I don't think that's any better. In fact, I think it's far worse because now you've
Agree.
got 2/3 of the country who hate the 1/3 as opposed to 50-50. Now, obviously hate's a strong word, and that's usually a smaller subset, but you get what I'm saying. It's like at least here, it's generally a half and half proposition. And I think the brilliant thing that the Trump administration has been doing so far, on the broader scale, is they're taking the right side of 80-20 issues all over the board, and they're forcing the liberals to then take the opposite, because all they exist for at the current moment, and for the last 10 to 12 years, is to oppose the Republican agenda, Trump's agenda. So whatever
Right.
position he takes, they take the opposite. And so they're further excising themselves, from the mainstream by just taking the 20% position on everything. And so now not only did they lose in a landslide, now they're making themselves, they're basically doubling down on stupid. They're just going extra far instead of just saying, well, because you have people like your Bill Maher's and your people who are like, it's no question that they're liberal and they'll say it themselves, but also they're like, okay, well, on this issue, it makes no sense to disagree with him, right? On this issue, it makes no sense to disagree with him. And then there are plenty of things where they'll disagree where we will agree, but it's like you can't take the 20% of every 80-20 issue and expect people to just be like, okay, well, he's really that bad. We'll just now believe that this is the right thing, right?
It's made all the worse by they must, like Democrats that will go that route. It's not all Democrats for sure. Like there's some reasonable people that maybe are a little more centrist than they want to admit. They for some reason being a Democrat is like a badge of honor for some people. They think that's like the good moral thing to do. It's like, well, come on, like name a policy that you really support in the last 10, 20 years that was actually like a net positive for society. Maybe there's some. I'm
I'm
only
sure
30
there's
something years
some.
old.
I'm sure there's
There's
some.
got to be some, right? But I agree with you. It's like, what is the Democratic Party standing for? This is what they don't understand yet. Like, this is why they lost. No one really knows what they stand for. It's like being a good person for the sake of being a good person. Like
Hmm.
Obama's thing that he ran on was change. I was way
Right.
too young to know what the hell was going on when that happened, but I even remember like his thing was change. Like it's
Hmm.
time for a change. Well, it's like great, you got all these nice little buzzwords and you got this marketing pitch all laid out, but what are we talking about? Like, what do you guys actually stand for? Please
Right.
give us a clue. Now, granted, like depending how deep we want to go here, you could just say, well, the Democratic Party is really just the front for the globalists.
Hmm.
They want to bring everything all together. They want to have a new world order that, if they could have, let's be real, if there's people that could have a socialist way of life where they're at the top making the decisions, the rest of us are the working class, that's how they would have it. And it's crazy to me that Democrats don't at all find that possible. Like
Right.
there's no way the government's lying to them and using them to their advantage. Like that, no, no. Like, if you're a Democrat, you're on the right side of history. And I don't understand that. I just can't figure out where, like, what are they putting forward these days that might even begin to support that? Because all I see, this is being very genuine. All I see from the right is like we want to not necessarily be subjected to change for the sake of change. We're not opposed to change, but also like there's a pretty simple way to live life. Just, follow a certain set of principles
Hmm.
and live a simple life where you work hard, you're faithful to your friends and your family and your wife, your spouse and this and that, and you support your community and things like that. Like what more do we really need? Why do we I, I don't know what I'm implying necessarily is the Democrats like what their main goal is, because again, I don't really know. I don't know
Yeah.
what they stand for. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, and I think all of that has changed so radically in the last, again, like 10 to 12 years, like where they used to be at least seen generally as like what would you call it? The sensible party. They used to be seen as the people who did make the most sense, shall we see, on the general scale. They used to be for free speech. They used to be for all these things, and then over the last
The
10 to
working
12
class.
years, yeah, the working class and not for the elites, etc. And if we want to talk about a party switch, we talked about this on one of our other episodes. Is they've made this massive shift where it's apparent to everybody that they've lost those values, right? They've now got more of the billionaires and the elites sending them money, and working for them essentially, or they're working for the elite, shall we say. They've lost the thread on free speech or free expression, but then they take things that are beyond the scope of free speech and free expression and try to cover it under the guise of those things. So instead of protecting what is actually free speech, free expression, they'll go after, like we saw with BLM. They'll go with the riot narrative as mostly peaceful protests, right? And then they'll try to ban people for real free speech at the same time, but then they'll say that these people are just speaking their mind, as opposed to saying throwing Molotov cocktails into department stores. It's like, so when they've done all this over the past 10 to 12 years, it does leave any sensible person in a position where you're like, what do they stand for at this point? And I think that's why, obviously we know that's why they got such a shellacking in the last election. But the problem I see now is they don't have anybody, they have no figurehead, they have no person at the top to really change the view going forward of the party. And as a party, they just seem fragmented because they have the few that are, so you might call center left, and they're very few, and you have a large majority on the far left side that nobody really agrees with. It makes me wonder every time, how are these people staying in office? How are they getting elected and staying elected when they've had these radical policies for ages? And it just comes down to where they live, right? They live in these echo chambers where these people just believe what they say. They either take it at face value, or even worse, and probably more common, is they have a D next to their name. So it's like, I'm a Democrat and I live in, Iowa, but not Iowa, like Washington or something like that. And this guy's been in office for 30 years. He's got a D next to his name. So when the next election comes, I'm going for the D. I'm not going to contemplate anything else.
Party lines.
And not only that, but the thing that really bothers me a lot too is, like, because nobody really pays attention to local elections, you hardly ever see anyone get primaried. That's why the same representatives, the same congressmen, that's why they shift around and become career politicians for so long, is because people just vote down party lines. They don't ever primary the person, regardless of whatever they've voted for, against in the last, 4 to 6 years of their tenure. And then next thing you know, they've been there for 40 years.
I think it's a reflection of the people that vote for them. It's like,
Right.
it's maybe not that our problem is perhaps more with the voters than the politicians. Maybe it's equal, because the politicians are nothing without the voters, but also the politicians are going to stand up there and accept the votes. So they're
Right.
the people that are going to, they know, like, I have a really hard time watching any like Democratic congressperson talk about anything, because it feels like there's never any substance. It's just talking about civil rights, and it's talking about inequality, and it's talking about climate change and education and funding, more funding and more this and that. And it's like there's never any like root. There's nothing at the core of any of this.
hmm
It's just like ideas that they kind of pulled out of nowhere that they know are important to people, but they never really drive that connection home.
I don't think it's things
Because
that
at the end of
are.
the day,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
like, anything that we encounter in our lives, should at some point come from our parents. Like, at the end of the day, like, all that society is just the continuation of families. We have kids and we raise them, and then they have kids, they raise them, and it's like we pass down the things that we've learned. And if you're teaching your kids to be, to live a certain way and to have certain values, the importance of government starts at, the role of government, I suppose, starts to get a lot smaller, because
Yeah.
government's supposed to look out for us. They're supposed to keep society on track. But if every citizen is raised in a way that they can be the best that they can be, like, do we need to be kept on track? Like, why do we need all these?
Right.
You figure there's got
Well,
to be a some point where we get to that we can agree on ideas, like this is the best way to live life. That's what's so shocking, is that people seem to be just absolutely saying nah to common sense, and they're like, no, we should just be letting people cross the border unchecked. Like what Trump's doing is crazy. I can't believe he's deporting people that came here illegally
And then
that
murdered people.
don't have any ties to anybody here.
Yeah.
Like that's just one example. Like it's just wild to me.
Right. I think the other part of it, kind of piggybacking on what you were saying earlier, is that I don't think it's that these things that they're standing for, shall we say, are actually important to people. I think they're just buzzwords, things that sound good to the average American, like the funding and
100%.
stuff like that. But no, but the average person thinks, I have problems. How do I solve it? Okay, this guy says that he's going to devote X amount of money to solving that problem. Okay, that's a problem that needs solved, and here's a guy who says he's going to do something about it, and that's pretty much where the thinking stops. So they say, okay, that's the guy.
Sure.
But if they do a little bit of research and they realize, for example, whether it's the war on poverty, whether it's the educational system, these are both things that trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars have been spent on with not only no results, but negative results. Things have gotten worse instead of better, regardless of all the money that's been poured into it. But people don't know that. If they knew that, then maybe they'd think differently about what the potential solution could be, which in both of those instances we know comes down to culture. It comes down to the way you were raised. It comes down to the single parent household. It comes down to all these much more complicated and important things than simply throwing money at it. And we've got one party who says, I'm going to throw more money at it, and another who says, you need to start taking responsibility and raising people to understand how to thrive. And so, which one's easier? If you're just a, especially if you're a single person, if you don't have any responsibility, but you do genuinely feel empathy for people who are in a bad situation, you don't understand the importance of those things. You might understand it in your personal life. If you have a job, you want to work hard and you want to make more money and you want to, grow in your company or whatever it might be. But on a societal level, they don't see that as the thing because they see these barriers to entry as the problem. And so how do you eliminate the barriers to entry? Well, you throw more money at it, or that's where DEI and all these things type
Your
of come in.
expectations.
Lower
Sure.
expectations. Yeah. So instead of the much more arduous process of raising a good society, you go with the guy who says, hey, I'm going to fix it over the next 4 years with more money.
It's a complete lack of awareness, discipline, and it's an outsourcing of critical thought. It's let everybody else decide things for me. And I'm just, like we're so advanced. We're so advanced in 2024. All the good ideas have been thought of already. People smarter than me, more powerful than me have already come up with these ideas. Let me just follow what they're doing and I can look like I know what I'm talking about. Like there's very little. I should make blanket statements this way. There's a major reliance on other people's ideas, and it seems like it's hard to blame them too because we got the phones, we got social media. People can just they can scroll through more information in 1 hour than most people could probably consume in like a month. But 50, 60 years ago, because they had to go to the library and they had to read shit. Nowadays,
And
you can
wait for
scroll
shit to
through an
come out.
hour. Yeah, right. What an idea. Now we've got the intelligence of the last couple thousand years at our fingertips like this, and yet people are perhaps, no, I don't want to say, I wanted to say people are dumber than ever, but perhaps people are
More
less.
naive than ever.
Yeah, they're accepting of just what's in front of
The
them. They're
status
accepting
quo.
of what has. Yeah, they love the status quo.
Hmm.
People are so afraid of change that they'd rather turn away and just keep doing what's been going on, despite the fact that, like you shared, like the evidence is everywhere that it's not working. We look at the test scores, you look at how many people live in poverty, how many people are obese. Why is that not a major thing in this country? Of any country that wants to be successful on the world stage in any metric at all, why not physical health? What is it, like 1 in 2 adults, 1 in 3 adults are obese?
Hmm.
That's fucking pitiful. It's a lack of discipline at every step of the way. And I really think that gets to the heart of the two different parties that we see. You see, on the left, everything's a top-down approach. Well, let's start at the top and work our way down. On the right, it starts at the bottom, it starts at the individual, and let's work our way up. Fix your own set as the wise guy Jordan Peterson says, set your house in order before you what is
Criticize the
that
world.
chapter again? There you go. Boom. Set your house in order before you criticize the world. A lot of people have forgotten that because quite honestly, people don't get punched in the face enough anymore. But
Yeah,
yeah, what are you gonna do?
right. Yeah,
Everyone
it's
feels so entitled to their opinion, and it's like, nah, man, you haven't earned it. You haven't earned your place to speak and put your ideas out in the world because they're half baked, and if they're not half baked, they're outsourced to someone else.
right. Or they're
Like,
just no good. I mean, there have been plenty of things that have been tried, and at the end of the day, it generally does fall back to the status quo. But like, there have been a lot of ideas that have been tried that are just not good ideas, right? And more of them will come. But then when other ideas, like, this is another thing about the kind of bipartisan nature too, is like ideas from one subset are seen as good and the other party is seen as bad, right? And we know there's overlap on both sides, right? Now obviously we tend to believe that our side has a lot more good ideas than bad and the other side has a lot more bad than good. I think that the outcome of the bad ideas from the left are prevalent everywhere at the moment. I think we're seeing a lot of them. I think a lot of things have been implemented from the left side of the aisle and they haven't worked out. And generally, the ones from the right side have been shut down, which is why, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, this whole ruling by executive fiat thing, I think, is such a powerful thing in this particular moment because Trump is doing it and just continues marching forward until something happens, until he's either cut off, like he's not, he's blocked by the courts or whatever it might be. But we might just find ourselves in a position where these ideas, it's not like every idea is his, and it's not like he's surrounded by stupid people, right? So the more ideas that they implement and the more successful they are in implementing those ideas, it's like the Gaza thing when he talked about Gaza could be like Dubai instead of the hellhole that it is right now, It's like at least it's a different idea, right? The same things have been tried there for so long and it's clearly not working. And it's that's just one example, but then there's like the tariffs and there's all these other things that are going on. It's like at least he's coming at it with new ideas because for a while now it has been the same old, the status quo, and then we see that it's not working. At least approach it differently. At least try something new, right? And see how that works out. It could turn around and bite us in the ass, but at least we tried, right? I'd rather do that and maybe take a step backwards than do absolutely nothing, knowing for sure we're taking at least 2 or 3 steps backwards.
I don't think we're any taking steps backwards. If we are, we're taking one step back to go like 5 steps forward because
Sure.
it's I 100% agree. It's crazy how comfortable people have gotten with the status quo, with their politicians just fucking lying to them, just not even, like okay, I can't pull out a perfect example of lying. Well, I can actually. I mean, Dr. Fauci is saying there was no gain of function research during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hmm. How'd that one go? Anyway, a lot of this lying seems to come from one side, not the other. But yeah, it just speaks further to how scared people are of change, which to me speaks to a deeper just insecurity on that these people have just about life in itself. They are so insecure, so uncertain about what's going to happen. They're so unprepared for the day to day that they have to latch on to these ideas that to them sound really, really spot on. To us, sound crazy. Like the idea of just let them keep pouring in the southern border. What's the big deal? No problem. Like, oh yeah, there's nothing we can do about it. Oh, 10 million people came in this year. Oh, there's nothing we can do about that. Bummer. We don't hear anything about that. And the truth of the matter is, like, if Trump, if his plans are successful in what he's trying to do, if they do work out really well, you're never going to hear that from the Democrats either. They have zero. They have no class. They will never admit that something the opposition did was beneficial.
Right.
Instead, they will find something else to pick at. They
Right.
will just find they will move on to the next thing that they can try to attack him about because they're not good people and they're not serious people. They are people with, well, they're serious about their own agenda. They're people with their own agenda that they want to implement. They don't want you to ask any questions. They want you to sit down and shut up and be mad at your neighbor and just keep yourself busy so they can keep slowly but surely sucking all the taxpayer dollars out of the country, use it for who the fuck knows what. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what good having all the money in the world is if you don't have any friends because no one can stand you. But regardless, like at some point these people got to start to pay attention. I give it a couple months, I think we're going to see some revenue coming in from these tariffs. I think we're already seeing all these countries lining up to have meetings. Clearly this is important to them. Clearly the United States' presence in the world, on the world stage, is highly significant,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly changing up that status quo where now, no, you know what, we want that trading field to be, we want the playing field for the trade to be level. Suddenly that's got a lot of countries really concerned. They're coming to meet. And I remember it wasn't that long ago that people were talking about us not being taken seriously, or even funnier, that now we are being taken serious again because the adults are back at the table during the Biden administration. Oh yeah, now we're real serious. Now we're gonna be, people are gonna respect us again.
Right.
Give me a fucking break.
Yeah, I think two things on what you just said. One thing that really bothers me is the contradictions. So, just to give a quick example, you've got the green crowd, which is notoriously left and far left usually, that says, there's too many people on the planet, we don't have enough room and resources for everyone, are the same people that say leave the
Garbage.
border open and let tens of millions of people come to the country. So their their policies are littered with these contradictions. So that's number one. And the other that you're talking about with the tariffs is I think it was Scott Bessent who was saying, who was like kind of summarizing this, but said something like, the whole operation here with the tariffs has been so masterfully implemented, and I agree with this because a lot of people, especially people, and it's always the people with all the money. I mean, it's like I forget what the percentages are, but basically the majority of Americans own the majority of the stock, and the minority of Americans own basically nothing or have debt. So those people are constantly, day in, day out, they're also worried about these tariffs and how it's affecting the market when really it doesn't even affect the majority of Americans. Yes, if you have a 401k and you have this stuff, yes, it's affecting you in the short term. I understand that, and the idea is that it'll get better over time. But you see the markets jump up one day, jump down one day based on these things that Trump does. So he says, "Oh, I'm putting in a universal tariff of 10% on everybody. I'm putting in," and then he raised it to whatever it was, or I think it was the proposed limits for each country. It's like if they're doing 64, we're doing 37. Just cut it in half. That's what we're charging them starting April 2nd or April 5th or April 9th. One of those 3 days. Stuff happened on every of
Generous.
those days. And then I think it was April 5th, and then on April 9th, he goes, okay, 90-day pause. So everyone's like, well, what the hell? Like, what are you going to do here? Are you going one way? Are you going the other way? Well, what he said was, this is a test. You've got 4 days. We're implementing this tariff on you. If you don't do something stupid, then we'll negotiate. So what happens? You've got dozens of countries lining up to take meetings with the president to negotiate terms. And you've got China. China's the one who says, you know what? I'm going to take my steel toe boot and I'm going to shove it up your ass. So I'm going to now raise the tariffs on you. And what does Trump do? He says, okay, you called my bluff. Now I'm going to raise them back. Then on April 9th, he says, 90-day pause. I'm bringing everyone down to 10% and we'll negotiate. Except for China. They're staying at 125%.
Ice them out, dude.
Ice them out.
Ice them out.
And now everybody, the entire global market. I mean, China's. I don't know how their market like stocks and all that type of stuff works, but their market, from what I understand, is crashing. It's cratering. They can't handle it for too long, really. I'm sure they can withstand it in the short term, but
And we
every
don't they don't import that much of our stuff. We import
exactly,
way more of their stuff than they import ours.
exactly.
That's what people are missing about all this. Go on, sorry.
No, I just think, I mean, that's pretty much the end of it, but I think it was just so masterfully done because now what has he done? He's lined up most of the world, most of our trading partners to equalize
They're coming to
or
us.
make some sort of adjustment that's beneficial to the USA. And China, meanwhile, is being completely pushed away from not just our market, but the rest of the world is also looking twice at China right now too. So it's not just that our sanctions are crippling their economy. No, it's that the rest of the world is also wondering if they're a legitimate trading partner.
To be clear, I think we could always use more research. I could probably use more research here. If I'm not mistaken, most countries can fend for themselves. Most countries have the materials that they need to produce their own goods and be relatively independent. There doesn't need to be, for the stuff that they can't do, sure, we can have international trade. But I don't know why international trade is the goal, why that's the standard. Like, yeah, it'd be great if everyone could get along, but at the same time, we know 100% there are several different major cultures, major religions, major ways of life that people on this planet enjoy right now. And to try to force things like, I guess no one's really forcing international trade, but it's you would kind of think that based on the way people are reacting to these tariffs. Like, how dare we try to be self-sufficient here in the United
Right.
States, despite that we're a large country. Like, there's not a ton of countries ahead of us in terms of population. We're a good-sized country. We should be looking towards independence. We should be looking at producing the majority of what we can on our own. And if we can get it cheaper and simultaneously more ethically from other countries, let's talk about that. But we know nothing coming from not much. Probably a lot of the stuff coming from China is not as ethical as it could be in terms of the wages that are being paid to people, the amount of hours that they work. It's funny that people still, these Democrats still love their Nike apparel.
Hmm.
Ask where that Nike apparel came from, they can't tell you.
Well,
So
they won't tell you.
no, yeah, if they knew, they wouldn't tell you, right? Because that's not what they're here for. They're not here to tell the truth. They're here to just try to make themselves feel good and make other people feel good for doing nothing. But at the end of the day, the tariffs, that part specifically, it's all about trying to return our status to the global stage. I don't know where these people get off. I think a lot of them, because I didn't know either. I think a lot of people don't know that other countries place higher tariffs on us than we place on them,
I didn't know that
creating that
either.
imbalance.
I didn't know that either. I
I would
think the
imagine
majority of Americans did not know that either. Yeah.
they
I
just hear the news being like, Trump's, he's alienating all of our allies, and yeah, blah blah
Yeah,
blah
how
blah.
about they've been like lining their pockets with our gold for decades and we've done nothing about it. That's another way to phrase that same exact principle. But I don't know how
It,
true that self-sufficiency argument is, but I know for sure that if other countries are capable of it, I know that we're not. And we learned that during COVID. We were getting almost everything between from PPE to medication to this, that, and the third, all from China. And we realized in a state of global panic that we don't have the infrastructure here that we need to be able to be self-sufficient. And that's part of this whole agenda as well is, okay, well, if it's going to cost you more to bring your stuff in, and even though you're paying, slave wages in other countries to create it, and then you're marking it up and making a huge profit here, if it's going to cost you more to do that, then you're just going to come here. You're going to bring your factories and your jobs here. So not only then will we have the materials, but also the material to do it here, right? To be able to employ Americans to do the work so that they can sustain their own families as well. So now you've got all of the product and you've got the income in the United States. And that at least takes a huge step towards self-sufficiency because like you said, it's not like we don't want to trade with anybody, but it's that we want to be able, should we need to, especially in the case of another, pandemic or whatever it might be, which I don't think anyone will ever fall for again, which is, if you think about it, could be sad because if the next one was really something to worry about, well, you cried wolf. So now it is going to be a problem. But
based
regardless,
on that video you sent me of Tucker and Alex Jones talking, apparently
right,
there's
something in
Fauci's
the
already
works.
cooking up another one. You never
Right.
know. Yeah, I think it should be a bonus if we can get other stuff more made of higher quality or of
Sure.
cheaper cost. If we can get that from another country, that should be a bonus. But I think we should be responsible for producing just about everything we need here at home. Why would we want to be reliant on anybody? Because people change like that, at the drop of a hat. People can change their intentions, they can change their desires, they can change their motivations, and suddenly you're left without the rare earth minerals that you need, or you're left without the steel that you need, or whatever it might be. I'm not going to profess to be an expert on what we make here at home, but the landmass that we have, like the labor base that we have here, there should be no reason that we should rely on any country for anything. And if we really but see, here's the thing. I was about to say, if we really value ourselves, or we really consider ourselves a world power, like a superpower, we don't seem to be acting like it. But I feel like a lot of people don't care if we are a superpower. A lot of people here in the United States
Yes.
don't see that as a badge of honor anymore. They see us only, the propaganda is working. They see us as colonizers, as just savages that are just taking what we want and not giving a second thought to it, which is garbage because I believe most of the world's economy depends on our economy. We're half the reason all the the that the world keeps on spinning, the half the reason that innovation continues, and that we're capable of the technological advances, and the various other resources that we have now. It's because of smart people here that were allowed to thrive because of a capitalist type of society with private investment.
Hmm.
But it's hard to talk about this kind of stuff with other people because they love what the media is saying a little bit more.
Yeah, and
It's wild.
I think we were also in our coming of age part of our life where we started caring about this stuff. I mean, at least for you and I, it's been a while, but even for some of our friends, like they're either just getting there or some of them even aren't there yet. And I think it's just so easy to, depending on where you're at in your life, like what you have going on, and if something doesn't directly affect you, you could kind of care less. I mean, I think that's the plurality of Americans at this point, you know. But we are at that point in our life where the decisions that are made now are going to directly impact not only us, our children, our grandchildren for the rest of our lives. Some of our friends, and just generally, Americans are just not thinking that far ahead. They could kind of care less, and they're also just completely ignorant of what's happening. So it is easy to just digest the mainstream talking points and the mainstream narrative because who's telling you otherwise? It's as far as some people. It's amazing to believe some people still think that news channels are objective. Like they're literally just telling you how it is. They're just telling you what's going on the day to day. And so it's amazing to believe that with everything going on right now, that there's any people like that left. And I think they are increasingly small. But so many people, they don't care enough because they're not affected enough. Gas prices go
Right.
up, they go down. It's just the way of the wind.
Well, I think it's coming to a point. I think people are starting to notice, like, damn, it's eggs were $6 a dozen. Up from in like 6 or 7 months, they went from $3 a dozen to $6 a dozen. Like everyone noticed that. I think the noticing is getting to a critical point where people can't help but realize, wow, nothing's really changed, and yet everything is changing. Why are things getting more expensive? Why are there suddenly so many more illegal immigrants in the country? Why has crime suddenly seemed to just shoot through the roof in the last 5 years? Like, what is changing when nothing else seems to be changing? Because people are they're starting to question this. They're starting to wonder, like, is this the way? Like the way that we've always been told? Is this the way to do it? But yeah, we've got people certainly learn at their own pace. I mean, you can't it's hard to know. Like most people just they wake up and it's like, okay, wake up, eat something, go to work or go to school. Okay, eat some more, work out, do some hobbies, hang some friends, go to
Workout's
bed.
a stretch.
Probably right, but
Right.
2 adults is fat as fuck. Like, come on, guys, take care of yourselves. But most people don't. We could be totally wrong on this, right? There could be more people just like you and me than we think that are tuning into Tucker Carlson or some of these other conservative shows every night and realizing like, what these guys are saying kind of makes sense. And what these other guys are saying seems to be the same shit over and over and over again, and nothing is changing, right? Why do we I personally love what is happening with Trump and Doge. I think it's long overdue. I'm also generally a skeptical person. I tend to question authority a lot. um, what gets me the most is when people will they'll really think that Trump has no plan. They
Hmm.
really think he's just a dumbass that is just acting out of spite or out of impulse, that he's got zero plan. Like, I'm sorry, but you guys are probably the dumbest ones. That you think he's been going these last 4 years, not plotting this moment right now. He hasn't been with his advisors every day or like every couple days, like trying to figure out like how they're going to do the things that they want to do. That's laughable to me. That's
Right.
fucking hilarious that some guy who has risen, whether you love him or hate him, yeah, there was a couple bankruptcies in there. You know, restructured some debt and got out of some bad investments and whatnot. But yeah, that this guy who's a billionaire who was universally loved until he came out as a Republican suddenly doesn't know what the fuck's going on. Like, you guys are kidding yourselves. Knock it off. For fuck's sake.
Yeah, I think I think that that's the charm of Trump too, is that he has a very methodical approach, but he also manages to come off a bit like a crazy person, and that works to his advantage all the time because people
He
will
knows it.
constantly blame or claim that he has no plan. Yet he'll do, and again, it goes back to that tariff thing we talked about earlier with the, oh, now they're on, now they're at this point, now they're paused. Like, what am I going to do next? And it's like, you never know what he's going to do. Well, what does that do? Yeah, it sends a little bit of short term turmoil in like the markets and stuff like that. But it also makes everyone else like line up at the door to figure out what's going on so that they can be the first ones, or at least make sure that they get in a position to equalize, whether it's the tariffs thing or anything else for that matter, to make sure that they're not the ones left behind, because you do everything the same like it's been done, and what happens? We continue to go further into debt, and other people, or other places, continue to get richer. So you throw a couple curveballs at them, all of a sudden they don't know what to expect next. They're lining up at the door saying, "Hey, let's figure this out because I can't take this much longer." Right? It was like the whole thing too during the first term with with the whole Putin puppet and all that type of BS, where it's like tr- one of the reasons that Russia was never, it didn't express territorial ambitions during his tenure the first time, is because they never knew what he was capable of. It's like, is he the guy that would be crazy enough to just drop a bomb on us? Maybe he is. Like, I don't know, and it's probably not good, probably not wise to call his bluff. It's like a little bit of that crazy, even though he is methodical, coming off a little bit crazy has only worked to his benefit and to the benefit of the country as well.
No plan is not the same as no experience. That's what people need to remember about Trump. It could be he doesn't have a plan. I don't believe that. I think he has a plan.
Hmm.
Even if he didn't, I think he's the kind of guy that has enough experience to just handle what comes his way. But again, I think he's got a plan. I think all of this has been planned more than we can imagine, because this is there's no way to be a fucking dumbass and dumbass your way into $1 billion net worth or more. There's just no way. You can't do it. Even if you inherit money, you cannot be a dumbass and get to billionaire status. It doesn't, it's not a thing. To think that this guy, it's just it's I don't know if these Democrats, like, I think they really think, people that are on the left, I think they really think he's an idiot and doesn't know, which is projection to the to the highest, funniest level possible, perhaps. Because how many of them are billionaires? Not, no, none of them. But it's I want people to just give it a chance, because we are not throwing our reputation down the drain. We are not starting any new wars with countries. We should remember that from Trump's first presidency, that he didn't start any new conflicts. That's not nothing. But I think people need to give him a chance and wait and see. But we know that's not how people work, because people, on a slightly different note, I think a lot of people are so miserable that they've gotta distract themselves with what Trump's doing. They've got so little going on in their own life that they have to jump on board with this identity politics and align themselves to Democrats to make themselves feel good about something because they know that the rest of their life is perhaps more shallow than it could be. And I'm not trying to be mean about that. Like not everyone is great at getting dates and not everyone is great at finding a good job and making good money and stuff like that. Not everyone is cut out to be a business owner and be a rock star necessarily. But it's just so weird that the people that seem to be almost like it's almost like the classic liberal, like they're those classic like rejects, like anti-establishment, just don't kind of fit in with everyone. But now they're supporting a party that is just straight up aiming at socialism. Like that's what
Hmm.
they're coming for. They're coming to get rid of all of our freedoms, make you a renter, not an owner, and the whole like you will own nothing and you will be happy about it. They don't see that this is where this is going if they keep voting for it, and they're just cleverly disguising it with their propaganda as we are the party of compassion. We care about human rights, we care about civil rights, and and just making sure everyone feels good and that everyone feels like they belong. Like, well, that's just not really how society works. So, at the first sign of a leader coming in that actually has some guts and actually will do the things that he says he's going to do, everyone acts like he's a fascist.
Right.
That really says something about where we've gone in politics over the last 30 years. Just
Yeah, it's a thing I hear
a wild
a lot
time.
lately. What was it you just said? The last thing you said.
Um, the first sign of strength emerging from an actual leader,
Right.
people think
Yes.
it's
Yes.
fascism.
Okay. So, yeah, the biggest thing is a lot of people are talking about like the constitutionality of certain things, which there's questions there, and they'll be answered, right? And Trump is obviously the first one to say like, if the courts reject it, then we'll abide. We'll of course try to appeal it because that is a legitimate part of the process as well. But at the end of the day, we'll abide if we can't. But
Almost
the
as if he planned all of this.
Right. But the part that bothers me so much is that people will get so angry about what he's doing, and he's the first president in at least our lifetimes who's doing exactly what he campaigned on, exactly what he promised to do. He's doing it all, and people are, on the left are more angry than ever. It's like, can you really be surprised? Like they everything that comes out, everything that he does, it's like they're surprised. It's like it's brand new news to them, and they can't believe what he's doing. It's like he
They're
campaigned on
so
all of
fucking
this.
dramatic.
Yeah, he campaigned on all of this. He's the first one to actually do what he said he was going to do, and of course, like they've really got their the only thing that's keeping them alive is that there is some short-term turmoil, and it's all based around the markets, which, and that's the first thing they criticize him on, because in his first term he was huge on the markets. Oh, the markets are doing great, therefore we're doing great and whatnot. But that's the only thing they've got going for them, is that the markets are taking a short-term dip because of this situation, this tariff situation, without looking at the long
Just a
term.
month ago, it's only down 3%, 3 to five
Right. And
percent.
and
It's not
sure,
even
that's
down
that
that much.
that's a good amount, but it's also not like life or death yet.
Nothing
And
crazy.
and again, if we're looking at the long term, we can assume that the long term is going to be just fine. And so that's the part that gets my goat the most, is just the absolute astonishment at everything that's being done when it's literally what he's been planning to do and voicing for months, years now
You know what I think
actually.
it is? Which is not surprising at all. It's a complete and utter lack of faith. Lack of faith in, yeah, for one thing, that side of the aisle is known for their lack of faith in any higher power, in anything beyond themselves and what they can see and touch and experience for themselves, which another conversation. But it's a complete lack of faith in another human being that maybe he does actually want what's best for the average person. Tax cuts just got passed. You're not going to hear anything about that. That's going to affect.
Right.
uh, I actually don't even remember the details of that. Um, is there an income limit to like the people that are going to be affected by his tax cuts? If I'm not mistaken, pretty much everyone's going to end up saving money.
Yeah, in the long run. So there was in his original tax plan. So the big thing was, the Democrats were huge on, oh, it's a tax cut for the wealthy people, for the billionaires, etc. And the
It's a 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs
the
Act.
way that things work, as I understand it, you give a tax cut to if you give it you can give it to everybody, but if the wealthy people get a tax cut, what it allows them to do is it allows them to hire more workers and give their product away for cheaper. Okay? And so the consumer wins out because they will end up saving money in the long run on everything that they spend their money on, right? Everything from groceries to gas to, voluntary expenditures. They're saving money in the long run. And they've campaigned for ages on raising general taxes on everybody, but more specifically, even the billionaires. Well, what happens when that happens? We know that they know how to move their money around. We know they know how to use it wisely. So what happens? They have layoffs. They sell their product for more expensive. And then even if you're getting a marginal tax decrease as a consumer, which generally, well, along with their plans, you get a tax increase, you're also spending more on everything that you need or that you want for that matter. So you end up losing a lot more money over the long term. And so when they just passed these, when they extended them, or I know they were talking about making them permanent. I don't know if that's a thing, but at least extending
That's the
them,
plan.
right? At least
The
extending
Tax
them.
Cut and Jobs Act from
I
2017.
know that Trump had met with some senior officials and was saying that he was open to the idea of raising the taxes on the wealthy as well as which I should say as well as decreasing them on the lower income. And the other thing that we were talking about the other day is part of this whole tariff situation is dependent. It's dependent on how that all shakes out. If we equalize tariffs with the rest of the world, then the nation becomes richer, and as such, we're able to we're able to give ourselves a tax cut because we have more money coming into the United States. On the opposite end of that, if we end up with a situation where we do implement higher tariffs on other countries, then we end up in a situation yet again where we're bringing in more money to the United States. So therefore, one of the excuse me, one of the potential proposed plans is to have zero federal income tax on people making less than 150,000. That's just dependent on how the tariff situation shakes out, which is why it's not an official policy position yet, because it all depends on how much money we're able to bring into the United States, whether that's factories and jobs moving back or just more tariff income from other countries where we're going to an external revenue service as opposed to an internal revenue service. It all depends on all these countries lining up at the door and what happens with the deals that are made with those countries. But regardless, of course, the goal, and this is, again, one of the first presidents in our lifetime to worry about this, is actually making the quality of living for the average working class American much better. Everyone claims
That
that,
would
but
come.
their policies lead to the opposite. He claims it, and he's actually putting things in practice to do it.
Yeah, the part people are forgetting about too is taking a good hard look at what the where the money's going in the first place. Because there's two ways to decrease a deficit, either make more or spend less. Ideally both.
And
You
he's
know, so
doing
like the
both, or
conversations.
attempting both at the bare minimum.
Right, and we know that's what Doge is set out to do, which it's mind-boggling. Like people won't even discuss, Democrats will not even discuss whether that's a worthy thing to even look at. Like, should we be looking at what the where the federal money's going? Like, should we be looking at? They don't even want to talk about that. It's more like how unconstitutional it is what he's doing, despite the fact that no judge has struck him down yet. We'd certainly as hell know about it if they did. It would be
They
on the news,
they
the
they
headlines of every
he
newspaper.
has had challenges from judges. He has been struck down on multiple things that have been appealed, but nothing that I know of yet.
That
And
stopped
it
the
is naivety,
frog
but
train to a grinding halt yet.
right, nothing that I've seen yet has actually stuck. So there have been challenges. I just actually got a couple of them today. Let me see if I can find the headlines real quick. Um,
I think that speaks to the nature of how much planning has really gone into this.
So and
Speaking to
it's
what I
all,
was
yeah, and
saying
it's
earlier.
also all political based. It's like judges are supposed to be nonpartisan. We all know that they're either D or R. They always have been. They always will be. And it is what it is. It's not like that's a huge issue, except for when they're making like overtly political decisions. But this one here says, so you remember there was the whole trans women in men's, or trans women in women's sports executive order, and he said if you don't abide by it, then we will rip your state funding. And so Maine, the governor of Maine was like, we're not going to do it. And he said, well, you better do it, or we're going to strip all your funding. And she goes, see you in court. And he goes, great, that'll be an easy case to win, right? So a judge just today, I saw a headline says, judge blocks Trump's Maine funding freeze. So you've got a judge. I don't know at what level. I haven't read the full article yet, but basically came out and was like, I'm deeming it unconstitutional for you to strip funding from them based on this executive order. And so again, this is something that's going to be appealed, will likely be overturned by a higher court, but nothing that I know of thus far has stuck. I just know that a lot of left-leaning political judges have tried their damnedest to stop him from doing certain things. It was like that they sent plane load of people back to. It wasn't
Look at the nice
Venezuela. It
bonus
was
from George
it
Soros
was a
that they
different. It wasn't Venezuela. It was a different country, but he had sent a plane load of people back, and thankfully they were already
El
off the
Salvador.
ground. Yeah, it might have been that one.
I
They
think they
were
were from
already.
Venezuela, but they were being sent to El Salvador.
That might be true too. Okay, that might be what it was. But regardless, they were already in international waters by the time the order from the judge came down blocking that transfer. So he's literally a judge just unilaterally decided you can't deport illegal immigrants.
I feel like that's not how that works.
No, but thankfully he didn't have to abide by it because they were already in international waters. So he's like, well, I'll just
Even
drop
with
them off and come
evidence that
back.
they are like the worst of the worst. Like just imagine being on the side, being on the side of the party that is wanting those people to be able to stay here. Just imagine that. Like that. It's the end of the conversation for me. It's like, all right, you want violent people that are provably violent criminals and part of a gang. You want them to be able to stay here because of their human rights? Fuck off. How about that?
Yeah. How about you don't get human rights in the way that we
If you
enjoy them?
violate other people's human rights, you don't get human rights. How
That
about that?
or you don't get the rights that are written into our law if you don't belong here. If you're a guest in the country,
Also,
you don't get the same rights that we get. If you want to become one, that's fine. Nobody has a problem with that. Well, okay, nobody has a problem with you doing it legally, and half the people, or more than half, have a problem with you doing it illegally. It's just that smaller yet growing subset of people who don't care either way. It's like, well, they're here, so treat them with respect. Of course, you want to treat everyone with respect, but it doesn't mean that they
mm,
not. Well, I don't mean everyone. I just mean generally, you
I
want to
say
treat people with
courtesy.
respect,
Treat
courtesy,
everyone with
courtesy.
courtesy.
Respect is
Respect
earned.
is reserved for
Sure.
people that earn it.
Yeah.
That's
Agreed.
something I've come to think. Go on, sorry.
But no, it's just that you do want to treat everyone with courtesy, but you don't enjoy the same rights that we enjoy just because you managed to get here either through the last administration, which just allowed you to walk right through the door, or by climbing the fence or doing it any other means that's illegal. You don't the same rights aren't afforded to you unless you've gone through the process. And once you go through the process, then welcome in. But otherwise, you can't just deem that everyone is on the same level.
There's a process, and every country in the world, if I'm not mistaken, every country worth going to at least has a process. What is it, Australia? You got to live there for like 10 years or something. If I'm not mistaken, you got to live there for like 10 years before you can even think about being a citizen. The idea, I get what these people are coming from. These new age globalist types that are like, well, boundaries are just a social construct, or whatever the hell it is. It's like, well, okay, why don't you take some immigrants home with you?
Mm.
That's where it'll all fall apart every time. And I know that seems like an immature thing to throw up there, but what's really the difference? Like if we should be just letting people in across the border, no problem. They can come walk our streets and do whatever they want. We don't know who they are. If you feel that strongly about it, why don't you just take them home with you? Give them a good place to stay. Come on. Let's see how fast that falls apart for you. Because the truth is, like they know it doesn't affect them. Like you were saying earlier, these people are happy to stand up for these ideas when they believe that it doesn't affect them. The problem they're going to run into is that all of a sudden it's going to be affecting them. And if I'm not mistaken, this is what's happening in Europe right now. All these, years, they've always been a little bit ahead of us, right? Because they're an older country than us. Well, you go over there, you can't have guns, but man, they sure as heck got a knife problem, don't they? You've got a problem up in Ireland, I hear, for one thing. Like you walk down the street, you don't see anyone from Ireland. You see people from other countries. And it's like, what's, are we not allowed to have national pride anymore? Like, the only way I think a true globalist, I get it. I've read enough sci-fi, I've seen enough movies to understand, like, man, it'd be pretty cool if somehow we could rise above all of this and become like a type 1 civilization that could harness the energy of our entire planet. We could put all of our differences aside. But that's not what it is right now. That's not where we are at 2025. And this is why I say, like, we are more primitive than we think. We've got wonderful gadgets. We've developed incredible technologies, but at the end of the day, we're still killing each other over land and over like religion and stuff. Like, we're just not that far along. We gotta stop. We gotta stop acting like every human being is a good kindred soul, and they just, like, some people have just fallen on hard times. That's not it. Some people have come up through really tough situations, and it's hardened them and made them dangerous and deceptive. And the fact that there are a lot of people that think we should just give everyone the benefit of the doubt because of feelings or whatever, like, that's a dangerous road to be on. It's a dangerous road to be on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We those hard times too. Like there's got to be some sort of nature about it because we know at least one person I could think of off the top of my head and more, but one specifically who came up through as rough a times as really you could ask for, and he made the best of that situation. It's like people, some of the most wealthy and successful people actually come from those situations. It's just one day they made a choice about what they were going to do with their lives, and then other people never either made a different choice or never thought that they had a choice. Like they never really, stopped to think what they could be or what they could do, and they just kept existing for a while, and things got worse and things got worse, and they never made that change. Um, but
It's not your fault where you start off, but it's your fault where you end up.
without
Or
question.
rather, it's not up to you where you start off, but it's up to you where you end up. And these days, I don't think anyone has an excuse. Like, everyone's got an iPhone, everyone's got access to the internet. You're telling me you can't go Google how to make more money, how to buy a house, like how to live a happier life? Like, for fuck's sake, man, there's no excuse. You'll find endless blog posts and YouTube videos on how to improve anything you want if you want it, but that's the key. And I think a lot of people don't want it. They lack that discipline that we were talking about. They want things done for them. And I really think my theory is that a lot of people in today's world, like, they've never, I should say, a lot of people in America born in the last 10 to 15 years, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years, they've never really experienced true struggle. Everyone has to pay the bills. Everyone goes through times where they're like lonely, and you just, you don't feel loved and stuff like that. Like, everyone's been through the hard times, but so few of us have had to deal with war, or so few of us have had to deal with like a natural disaster that destroyed everything that we had. So few of us have had to deal with a tyrannical government.
Or
Hopefully,
true
thankfully.
poverty, like real abject poverty.
Yeah, like, poverty in the United States is still living large in a lot of other countries in the world. And I think a lot of that's where this entitlement comes from in this day and age. Like, people don't struggle in the United States. So, like, struggle is relative. I understand that. Like, my struggles may be different from your struggles, etc. But this is on another level. Like, some people, they can't it's they don't get famous on YouTube, and the it's the end of the world. It's like they they see someone walking by them with a MAGA hat on, and they feel attacked. It's pathetic that these people have gotten so soft because they've dealt with so little struggle. Because, thank the Lord, our parents and our grandparents worked so fucking hard because they had to,
Mm-hmm.
and now we've got this society where you can just fucking, stick your thumb up your butt and somehow still make your way into a comfortable living. But I think that's what's changing, and that's what people are they're so concerned about. They're so nervous about. It's like, okay, if Trump can get through and start to make these kind of changes, what else can change in my life? Maybe I don't really have control over my life. I hope that's what's happening, but I don't think that's really what we're seeing. I think we're seeing people disturbed that their people really upset that their comfort is being disturbed. That now suddenly they have to like use their brains a little bit extra, and I don't know. I digress.
Yeah, I
It's a crazy
think
time.
I definitely agree with all that. It's been a great conversation, dude. We'll pick it up again next time. But for now, we'll sign
Indeed.
off. Let us know what you guys think about these type of videos. If you guys like the kind of podcast talking type videos a little bit more, if you like the more reaction type videos, let us know what you think in the comments. We'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.
Be safe. Be good.